All right, folks. Thanks to all the folks that are tuned in to this Week in Photo live stream. This is going to be a good one. I'm going to be talking to some folks that were supposed to be on the show before the hiatus, and now they're back to make good on that. So we're going to start the show right now. Here we go. All right, in this episode of This Week in Photo, we're going to be talking about how to own your own niche. This is TWiP. All right, okay. So if you've noticed over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking a lot about business and how to operate a business if you're a photographer, all those sorts of things. We're going to switch it up a little bit this week, obviously, but it's still in the same vein. But these two guys, Mr. Don Komarechka and Mike Sharky James, are here to talk about owning your own niche in photography or in business overall. Hey guys, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Frederick.
Hey, Frederick. It's great to be back on. Long time, fifth time, I guess it is.
Is it the fifth time? It's cool. It's good to have you.
Sixth time, maybe. I think it's actually sixth.
Well, we've got a ton of new fans and new listeners and new watchers to the show, so I want to have both of you guys introduce yourselves. Mike, let's start with you. I'm gonna take a stab at introducing you, and then I'm gonna have you fill in the blanks. So, Mike Sharky James from Henceforth, I'm just gonna call him Sharky. Sharky runs the Petapixel Photography Podcast, which is a very popular blog and podcast, so much so that we harvest them from time to time for content for This Week in Photo. But tell us a little bit deeper about who Mike Sharky James is.
So I'm a former photojournalist, retired photojournalist, and had an idea to do a podcast after years of listening to TWiP and following you guys. So this is still tripping me out that I even know Frederick Van Johnson,
whatever,
FVJ, let alone Don Komarechka.
And that's impressive right there.
I try to limit my Canadian exposure. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
there goes all of Canada right now. But
go.
I had an idea for a podcast. It was the Lens Shark Photography Podcast, and I borrowed from Petapixel as well. That's where I got my stories from. And about 8 months later, they said, hey, why don't we, your peanut butter and our chocolate, your chocolate and our peanut butter, the two great tastes that go together, let's team up. And so that was, almost like 3 years ago now. And I'm like about 267 episodes deep just with the Petapixel Photography Podcast. I also do another show with a good friend of ours, Brian Matiash.
Yeah,
I do the No Name Photo Show. So two of the most popular photography podcasts out there. And cool. I love it. It's fun.
Very cool. Welcome to this photography podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on, man.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
And Mr. Don Komarechka. Don, you're up north in Canada, holding down the fort, photography-wise, taking pictures of all things, including what you're most well known for, I would argue, is those crazy photos of snowflakes and the like. Introduce yourself to the TWiP audience.
Yeah, and it's snowing like crazy outside right now, and I'm done with it for the season. I did my my project ended March 25th, and it's still snowing, and I don't care anymore. I'm moving on to spring, doing gardening. Even though it was a snowstorm earlier today, I was chopping down trees and preparing things for the new year. But my work is, I guess I would say, encapsulated in the unseen world, the stuff that I can't see with my own eyes. That's infrared photography, ultraviolet, macro, the stuff that's way too small for us to see. But it's fascinating, it's interesting, and moreover, it can be very beautiful if photographed correctly. And there are stories to be told on those scales. And the more you can build a narrative into that sort of work, not only is it more challenging, but the end image just feels like a fairy tale or science fiction, even though it's right under your feet. So that gets me jazzed about photography. And it's very technical, and it's very scientific, and you have to really dig into the weeds of physics and math to figure out how to get the best results. But that's what makes me, a happy photographer.
Yeah.
I should also state that I've started up a photography podcast in those really geeky veins called Photo Geek Weekly. And we dive into the weird and wonderful news of the week in photography, a lot of the stuff that's off the radar. And that can be found at photogeekweekly.com as well.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes and the blog post and all that stuff for this episode. This is the perfect quorum to talk about this topic, which is own your niche, right? We're all podcasters, we're all photographers, and we all specialize in one thing or another, even loosely in some cases. So before we do that, that's our topic du jour. But before we dive into that, there's a couple of news stories that I put in the notes that you guys have that I want to touch on. The first thing is Adobe. They updated Lightroom CC and Lightroom CC Classic with some really interesting features in there. Have you guys had a chance to play with the app yet?
Haven't played with it yet, but it looks exciting. This is going to get people there a lot quicker, and I think make Lightroom a more enjoyable experience for them, because it's been slow, as we've talked about, right?
Right. That's
faster.
the main
It
thing,
is faster.
right?
I've complained about its slowness for literally years now, but it is definitely faster, and this is going to be some great stuff for people. A lot of people are excited about this.
Yeah,
I've dipped my toe in the water here too, and this is a tip of the iceberg kind of transition for Adobe. This, I think, will allow a lot of creators of presets to re-envision what a preset actually becomes. Because what Adobe has done here in these updates is they've allowed the much forgotten about in the very, very bottom panel of Lightroom, the camera calibration option. And it would usually default to Adobe Standard, which was trying to encapsulate all the different styles of cameras from Canon, Nikon, Sony. Every manufacturer would process color slightly differently, and Adobe tried to standardize that so that an image taken from neighboring cameras of the exact same scene would look similar. Well, they've expanded that quite drastically here. And Frederick, I don't mean to steal your thunder of telling about the story,
No.
but what does this mean to you in terms of the power to the people to create interesting content that is a better starting point than what we had before?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So the main thing for me is, and we've been talking about this. We talk about this in the TWiP Pro critiques that we do. We talk about it in the Watch Me Work sessions on the shows, and all roads seem to lead back to Lightroom being the de facto standard, at least right now, for post-processing. Some people are jumping ship to Capture One and going other places, and there's now, I think now more than ever, since we've been using Lightroom, there are more alternatives out there for people to go to, and many people are running because they don't like the subscription model that Adobe has, or they like the way that another piece of software processes raw files better, or whatever. But the main complaint that I've heard about Lightroom has been the speed. And it seems like Adobe's listening. And there was also some quibbles about the layout, like, for example, where they put the profile settings and lens corrections and those things that arguably you would do first before you get into deep level post-processing of an image. They sort of buried that, and they made some interface changes to up-level that stuff, hopefully to speed things up even further. I don't know. So I want to talk about a couple things with Adobe, but not too much. Sharky, tell me about your workflow. Are you in the Adobe world? Are you a subscriber to the cloud and happily fork over your money every month?
Well, I don't know about happily, but
I'm setting you up, man. I'm setting you up.
Yeah, each and every month I'm paying Adobe $50, which I happily do because I have to use Audition to edit our podcasts, and just there's Illustrator, so many things that I've used for years. $50 a month, and now it's going to be more, isn't really that big of a deal. Yeah. And you get these incremental updates as you go as part of your subscription. And at first a lot of people didn't like that, but I dig it because you get these new features. As you got Adobe AI, right? Their AI is Sensei, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. It keeps improving things as we go, and they're all tools. You can use them or not. Yeah. $10 a month for the photography bundle. I mean, come on, Photoshop and Lightroom. That's $100, yeah. $120 a year. That's not a big deal. Yeah. And we're seeing things converge, right? So you got Lightroom Classic, which is what we know as Lightroom, and then you got Lightroom CC, and things are going. Adobe wants us to go in the mobile direction. That's clear. Yeah. But my workflow is if I'm shooting, like, let's say a sporting event, a football game or whatever, and I've got hundreds of photos, I'm going to call those in Photo Mechanic because I value my time. And so I don't do that in Lightroom because that's not the best place to call at the moment. Hopefully, why don't they do a culling module? That would be so easy to do.
And that's what I hear.
Spend $150 to get Photo Mechanic to do that. But, so if I've got a lot of images, I'll start in Photo Mechanic, and you can tag them and all that, and you know, star rate them and color code them, bring it into Lightroom and edit from there. If I'm doing onesie, twosie photos, I'm doing that in Luminar because I really enjoy Luminar.
Yeah.
It's a fun program to use. And it's just out of the gate, it was just pretty darn amazing.
Yeah, no,
which not a lot of programs are.
And that's what I was alluding to at the beginning about there's lots of alternatives out there. Skyloom with Luminar and Capture One. They're really cool alternatives, and not necessarily that they're better, but just all of our brains are wired differently, right? So Luminar may work better with your synapses than Lightroom does, and arguably, hopefully, over time, the Lightroom will get faster, as will those. Don, what about you, man? Are you held captive by the Adobe Cloud as well?
I think held captive is a good term because, I use Premiere and Illustrator and Audition and of course Photoshop and Lightroom. And so I've got to keep that subscription going. But by all means, I'm trying to find alternatives. And I've tried a lot of the raw processors out there just to kind of dip my toe in all those different waters and see, what is the most palatable to me. And On One software with their raw processor is, to me, it is the biggest incumbent. This is the piece of software that is evolving the fastest and is bringing up the newest features that I am most likely to gravitate towards. And I've been talking with them a little bit behind the scenes just to add in a few little fiddly things that will allow me to jump out of Lightroom and leave it behind entirely. And they said, yeah, it's completely possible. We'll try to throw something into the next update. So that being said, yeah, we have all of these tools at our disposal that make us better photographers. But at the end of the day, we have more on our plate right now to feast on than any photographer has ever had in the history of our industry, and we should not be complaining about anything.
I know, but I'm going to argue. I agree with everything you said except one thing: software doesn't necessarily make you a better photographer. It allows you to be a better photographer. It doesn't make you a better photographer. Just like a camera, a good, top of the line whatever camera is not going to make you a better photographer, or a fast car is not going to make you a better driver. All right, let's switch off of that, guys. The next story in here is kind of funny. I'm going to blow through these pretty quickly, but it's about a photographer that sued over some stolen bug shots. Don, did you read this? And I
love
you
Alex
to look at this
Wild.
one because you do macro shots, and this is kind of in that genre. What do you think of this?
This is right in my wheelhouse. And Alex Wild does a lot of photographs of insects. He's very famous for his ant photographs, which I'm quite envious of. And I know how difficult those photographs are to take. So he came across a pest control company that had stolen 10 of his photographs. And okay, well, you start whatever communication process you do when you are a professional photographer and somebody steals your work. And Alex has a great copyright infringement strategy as well, and that's been written about on Petapixel actually. But so he approaches them, and he basically comes back. And it says something to the lines of, from the owner of the company, that, this was not necessarily an intern, but like a non-employee that we, like a third party that we contracted to design this, and we'll sort it out quickly. Then he revisits the website some like 8 months later, like a lengthy period of time. And he sees that the images they're still there. Not only did they not get taken down, they're now infringing on 8 more of his images. Even I can't comprehend the hubris here. This is just asinine from the view of a company that knows they're in the wrong and continues to do it. From a legal perspective, this is potentially a slam dunk for Alex Wild. So,
it makes you wonder where they sourced these from in the first place, right? Because they didn't just go scour the web. They blamed it on their web developer or something. They didn't just go scour the web and find 8 or 10 of these and then go find some more. And just they had to have found them at something that told them who the photographer was. And that owner got back to them and said, no problem, we'll remove it. We have an account already with, it wasn't Adobe stock, it was like Stocksy or something. And he should have used that instead. Don't worry, we'll take him down. And then they did it. It just looks it looks willful. It's if anything, it's just negligence, right?
Yeah. Well, you know what they'll
You
do?
would think that from that point they would know what they're doing and not do it again.
It'll be a
Well, it's
it'll be
malicious.
a let's blame the intern issue. You know, oh, that was just somebody that started. They were new. We've let them go. Sorry. You know, and they were probably
They were still working for your company,
Yeah.
And that's not a
they
legal
represent-
defense.
It's not. Ignorance of the law is no defense of the law, right? We hear that.
You with copyright, you either infringed or you did not.
Yeah.
And they did, and then they did it again.
Yeah.
And so he's going for $150,000 per image, which is the statutory limitation. He might not get that. It's unusual to get the full amount, but to a judge, this isn't going to look like a huge mistake. You know, it's going to look a little willful, even if it was just negligence.
Well,
so he's going to
power
get
to
a
him.
good chunk of change.
More power to him to let's set the standard for the industry, right? So, Don,
I
what would you
kinda
do
wish-
if this happened to you, Don? Like, what would be your recourse if someone went to your website, they saw, you know, we're doing this article on snowflakes, and they pulled down, or macro or whatever, and they pulled down, let's say 5 or 6 of your images. And your site is very well laid out, so they know who they belong to, and then they use them in, say, a national billboard campaign. What would be your recourse? What would you do?
Oh, I would be laughing all the way to my lawyer's office.
Giggling.
But, you know, I have lawyers in Canada and the U.S., and I use a company to do things internationally as well. But if I have that scenario and it's a legitimate company and they have a mailing address on their website, they will get a registered letter from my lawyer. And I hate to go that route, but I don't like to get intimately involved with these conversations. I've had people come up to me behind the scenes and say, okay, well, you know, I'm so sorry that we infringed on your image. You know, my wife just lost her job, or I had somebody say, like, my 8-year-old daughter is diagnosed with cancer, and I'm like, okay, playing on the heartstrings here. I'm an artist and I'm a human being. I'm not saying that lawyers are not human beings, but they're removed at least one step from all of this, and they'll ask for the pink slip or the medical bills or whatever it happens to be. So you have to get a lawyer on your side in order to facilitate pursuing this in any meaningful way. And yeah, people infringe on my work. Funny enough, Sharky, I write periodically for Petapixel. I've got about a half dozen articles that have come up over the years, and people will pull the entire Petapixel article that I wrote, all the images and all the text, and just duplicate that on some other photo blog. And so they've stolen, I don't know, a dozen images and all of my written text. I mean, that is pure copyright infringement. And then what do? Well, it's a company in Romania or Russia. Well, you know, maybe they enforce copyright in Russia with a gun to somebody's head. I have no idea how it works there, but I can't get a Russian lawyer to do anything on my behalf. So a lot of that stuff you just have to let go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you hit it. The answer to the question is use the right tool for the right job, right? So in this case, it would be a lawyer. And especially if they come with the sob story of, oh, this happened, and you know, I lost a leg, and that's why I stole your images. It's better to have somebody that can have that conversation with them and abstract you out of it. All right.
So they don't have a leg to stand on, is what you're saying?
I knew you were going to go there.
Oh, no way. They have just one. I guess they have one leg to stand on.
I know. You take the other one. So you lost one. I'm going to take your other one. All right, guys. This next thing I want to hit on before we get into our feature discussion about owning your niche is about Instagram. Actually, it's a two-part story. Instagram is shutting down some APIs, and kind of a side story to this is they're bringing back the ability to show animated GIFs in your stream. But let's just talk about that first, or actually only. Let's just talk about that one piece and then jump in. So shutting down the APIs, and there are lots of services that are using Instagram or that are enhancing Instagram by allowing people to pre-program out posts over time and do all sorts of things so that they can automate their feed. Is it, you think it's Instagram's goal to shut those kind of services off, or are they up to something else? Don, wait, you want to go first?
Well, I know that many years ago, Twitter closed down a lot of their
Yeah.
API access to third parties that were basically making a Twitter client that had their own flavor and style and dynamics. And one of the real reasons for that was not only to funnel things back through the official app, but if they were to modify their terms of service or to add extra features, it would be instantly available to anybody that updated that app. And it really reins in on their control over the platform. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that that streamlines things and makes it more useful. For me, I've always used Instagram as a tool to throw up my best work to a big audience, uh, and I can't do that necessarily as easily from my cell phone as I would like to.
Yeah.
It's not the cell phone photos that I put on Instagram. I do my snowflake series up there and everything else, and so I've got to email the photo to myself and then save that on my phone, and then I'll post some quick text onto Twitter, load up the Twitter app on my phone, copy that text over to the Instagram app, load up the phone. It doesn't work nicely for me.
Yeah.
I wish that there was an API that just let me do that from the desktop. And we are on the cusp of maybe having that, but no, they are shutting that down too, unless they officially want to support that. So this doesn't make me happy.
Yeah.
I've always wondered why they don't add these features in that these other companies do, being able to see who your ghost followers are and all that. Why don't they just incorporate that into Instagram? They incorporated stories from Snapchat and from everywhere else. Why can't they do these simple things?
Yeah, I wonder a lot what I mean, obviously everything's going mobile, right? I mean, even if I look at the stats for our YouTube viewers, we're like 50-60% mobile that are viewing both the stream and the replay, right? And it's growing. So at a certain point, it makes sense. I mean, it made sense years ago to go mobile first, but the computer or a regular, I feel like an old guy now, like a regular, in my day, we had computers with screens on them and we sat in front of them with a proper keyboard. Like if you want to do real work, or I know it sounds weird, but if you want to do real work, you want to sit down, comfortable, big screen, windows everywhere, and get stuff done and be productive, you need a proper computer for that. And it seems like like Instagram and Facebook are forcing us down this road of get used to doing it on these tiny screens. I mean, as I say that, I feel like I said, I feel like the old guy saying, well, you should use this old thing because it works better. Is that it? Or does it have to be an or, Sharky? Does it have to be you use the desktop or mobile? How come it can't be and? Where is the and? Why is and leaving our culture?
Instagram is owned by Facebook. They have a lot of money. Well, did until recently. They have a little less now, but that's their problem. Why can't they be an and? Why can't they put a team towards making it so we can do these things on the desktop as well? I agree. I'm 47. Your eyes get bad. That screen, no matter how big that iPhone screen is, gets smaller by the year.
Right.
It really does, right? Bifocals or not. I haven't gone that route yet, but that's coming soon.
Hey, I'm thinking about it. I'm not proud.
Yeah. So why can't you do it everywhere? Why can't we have that? These are simple things. They could easily port that to the desktop.
Well, and they do some things on the desktop because, when I'm boosting a post on Facebook and I'm giving a few dollars to a specified audience, there's a little checkbox that says, do you want to promote this on Instagram as well? And I'm doing that from the desktop. I mean, these things are somewhat intertwined, but they're just not letting me do it exclusively on the Instagram platform. And maybe they want to have a complete separation on that, and that's fine. But for a content creator that's paying money to Facebook, why can't I just make an Instagram post from there? I can respond to them all. When I go into my messages on my Facebook page, I've got all of the existing posts and I can write all of my responses on Facebook. That's there. It exists. Why can't I post my content in the same platform? Drives me nuts.
Yeah.
They want you to pay for these things.
Well, and I wouldn't
mind paying a little bit. Just give me that functionality.
We are the product. We are the product for Instagram, for Facebook, for all these social media networks. Until you pay them a subscription fee, like Adobe, you're going to be the product, and you're going to be at the whim of whatever the product manager or marketing manager or engineering team or whoever decides the best way to monetize you is, right? So we're mired in that culture of. And it's weird because on the one hand, I'm a consumer, right? And I want this stuff to work. I know I'm a consumer. But on the other hand, I feel like, I'm creating this content and it is inherently mine, but it's not. right? So like whenever you put a post up on Instagram, if you go back and read their terms of service, you probably want to pull that post down from Instagram. I don't know. It is it's a mess. I don't know.
Well, and I'm looking at the comments, and Jennifer Wolf, Jenny, a student of mine and friend, says that you can use the developer access in your browser to switch it to a mobile agent, so that Instagram detects it as if you're on a mobile browser, and you can upload that way. That works, but it's also against their terms of service. So in doing so, you might have some success, but they could shut you down for violating their terms at any moment. I don't think they have with anybody, but I don't want to take that risk.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We've got to remember, you're building your house on somebody else's land.
Yes, you are.
You know, so you're beholden to whatever their terms are, and they change as needed.
Yep. I like to say you're digital sharecropping. That's what you're doing. So. All right, guys, let's move on to this featured story that we have going on here, and it's about 3 ways to own your niche. So this is, you guys are experts at this, and Sharky, I want to start with you because, like you said, you took your podcast from the Lens Shark podcast all the way up to where you are now, a very popular podcast that is, you know, kind of running on Pentapixel or part of the Pentapixel photography network or you know, suite there. So tell us about how you did that, and if you can weave in there some ways to, you know, for photographers to kind of own a niche, and what would you say? So to kind of squeeze out the competition per se.
I've got even better example than that, but I can roll that in as well.
Go for it.
You have 2 of the best guys, I think, on this for this. So Don is known for his snowflake photography as a subset of, you know, the invisible world and that sort of thing. Like he said, I used to be a photojournalist, just like you were. You were a photojournalist in the military. I was a civilian photojournalist for newspapers. And so as a photojournalist, you are a jack of all trades. We don't say master of none. You shoot enough assignments, you master a lot of them. I know people are tired of hearing about this, but just at my last newspaper, 5 years and 3 months there, I shot over 1,500 assignments. That's 1,500 data points. That's tons of games, tons of grips and grins, tons of, you know, business profiles, etc. And you get good at a lot of those. But what I specialized in was sports. So whenever there was state championships, they would send me, you know, downstate to Phoenix to shoot that and stuff because I did that really well. You know, something, 1 or 2 things is gonna come out like that. But so, you know, that's a specializing as a subset of your greater, you know, skill set. It's you know, they're all tools that you can draw from. But as far as the podcast goes, I created something that didn't exist before. Apparently, it was just my certain style was me. You know, I was influenced by you, Frederick Van Johnson, and Scott Bourne, and, you know, the Kelby crew, and just all, you know, Martin Bailey, our friend, Chris Marquardt, all the OGs in the photography business, right? And so when it came time to do my own podcast, I could have done one that was like Martin's or like you or whatever, but then I'm not being me. I'm trying to be like you, and I would be a poor copy of Frederick Van Johnson or Martin Bailey. So I just chose to do my own thing. What kind of show would I listen to? And that's what I created. So you might do weddings, do your style of weddings. You know what I'm saying? Just try to like niche down and be really good at that. But you also have to be available to do other things as well, portraits, and maybe you're going to be called upon to shoot some sports, and you know, someone's got some money to pay you. You should know how to do that.
Yeah, I think there's different levels here, and you know, I would have to disagree with you, Sharky, saying that you'd be a poor copy of me. You'd be a good copy of me, just slightly underexposed. But you know, I had to get that in there. But,
I knew you were going to as well.
You know, I was gonna slide it in there. Okay, so I think there's no ors here, right? I think there's ands, and if you're like being the jack of all trades, master of none or one or whatever, I think you can be the best, or at least strive to be the best in one thing, right? But that doesn't say that you have to forsake all others underneath it. You could be, and you could still be really good at everything else. But I feel like Don, you know, I'm going to throw it to you next. Like you, when I literally, I'm not even joking. Whenever I see a photo of a snowflake, I'm looking at the credit. That's Don, you know? So you have become synonymous with snowflakes in my head, which is where people want to be. in their genres. They want to be the Don Komarechka of snowflakes in whatever they're doing, in weddings, in sports, in model photography, etc. So Don, how do they get to that? Because I know you do more than just snowflakes, and you're good at a lot of stuff, but you've planted a flag on that snow mound, right? So tell us how people can follow in your footsteps.
Well, and to stay, with your hand on that flag and saying, "Hey, I'm there," and everybody look at my logo on that flag is difficult because I do a snowflake series every winter, and at this point, I'm producing 70 separate images, each of which take 4 to 5 hours of editing every winter in order to keep that name up there. It's not an easy task to be the king of any particular castle, but the more niche it is, the more obscure a particular topic is, the fewer people you have competing against you, and the more you'll stand out independently. So snowflakes were something, I mean, they've been photographed for well over 100 years. I am not the first snowflake photographer, and I won't be the last. So why is that valuable? Well, I could count on my hands maybe 20 photographers that I've seen really good snowflake photographs from. But landscape photographers, hundreds, thousands, multiple thousands of people I've seen great landscape photographs from. That is not a niche by any means whatsoever. So how do you define a niche for yourself? Well, I have found all of my niches based on my personal interests outside of photography. They have nothing to do with photography whatsoever. They have to be my curiosity of the world around me, my tinkering attitudes, my constant asking of what if and finding answers to questions. And so that led me to explore infrared photography. And I'm writing a book on that right now. And macro photography in general, and staging things, and ultraviolet photography. These things that I've been doing and pursuing, there are fewer and fewer people doing the same thing. And when I take a photograph sometimes and I get a feeling in the back of my head, I think nobody else has made this kind of image before. It's a giddy excitement, like you know what's in that Christmas present that you're about to open up. It's that gift that you've always wanted, and it's there. The hints have been laid by your parents. You're 8 years old in the prime of Christmas, and there it is right in front of you, and you've got your Sega Genesis, and you can carry on and live the rest of your life as happily as you can possibly be. To me, that's what a niche is. You have to be passionate about it. You have to feel an inner joy. And if you don't, then that's not your niche, or you haven't refined it far enough. This is a process that does not happen immediately. It's a process that for me took almost a decade to be where I am right now, constantly pursuing and failing and trying different things that just didn't work the way that I wanted them to. I've tried street photography, I've done aerial photography, I've done all sorts of different types, but they just didn't hit home for me until I finally hit the nail on the head with a few of them. About 4 or 5 of them I can claim I'm good at. And a big fish in a small pond, and there's a lot to be said for that.
You hit one thing right on the head there, and I want to explore that a little bit, because I have on my notes to hit this, and that's the money, or let's call it the driving factor behind you choosing a niche to go into, right? So, and to put a fine point on it, you can be the best at your craft and not be getting paid a dime at it, whereas there's another guy over here to the left that's okay, average, slightly above average, or mediocre, that knows how to market himself and is raking in money hands over fist. Arguably, he's the owner of that niche, right? Or is he? So how do you reconcile that? In other words, Sharky, I'll let you take this one. How do you go down the path of saying, okay, I want to own this niche, and I want to own it for the reasons of getting paid, or I want to own this niche because I thirst for approval by others, and I want lots of hearts and likes. That's my goal. How do you reconcile that? And is one better than the other? Is money better than likes, thumbs ups, and all that good stuff?
You have to do ultimately what's going to make you happy. Otherwise, you're not going to have longevity with it.
Yeah.
How many people go to their 9-to-5 job, corporate America? Let's say they're working for Adobe, or they're working for General Motors or whatever, and they just hate their job, but it pays well, so that's just, after a while, that just wears on you. So if you do something, you love, it's not like working, right? You won't work a day in your life, as they say, but you have to pay the bills. So there has to be some sort of balance there. And if you could do, like, a lot of photojournalists are out of work since the year 2000. half of all photojournalism jobs are gone. They're not coming back, most likely. And so a lot of the photojournalists, what they did is said, well, I'm a storyteller at heart. And so I'm going to go do weddings. Now, I was a storyteller. I tell stories on my show, but you literally cannot pay me to shoot a wedding. I have less than zero interest in shooting a wedding. It sounds horrible to me.
Yeah.
You have to love it. You just do. Otherwise, especially an 8 to 12 hour day, you have to love it, or the money has to be so good that you're willing to put up with that nonsense, right?
Yeah, yeah. And even then, you're like, oh, what did I sign up for? 30 grand is just not going to do it for me. I need more money. Yeah. The whole thing is interesting, just looking at it from the standpoint of money versus likes and what's your driving force. It's hard to, it's easy for us to sit here in front of the camera on mics and say, yeah, you got to do it for the love of it or else you're going to fail. But if you're at home and you got a starving kid or a kid that you're trying to put food on the table, it's going to change your decision-making process slightly, I think. It may even push you out of photography into something that will put food on the table. So Don, how do you reconcile that, right? So you've built an ecosystem. You got a little baby over there. You got a wife and all the different encumbrances that adults have, you have them. How do you manage to balance all that whilst keeping your enthusiasm for your brand of photography?
I got to pay the bills. That's number one, right? The lights have to stay on. We have to keep our house. And my wife has a great job as well. But, I am the one that pays a majority of the bills for, electricity. It's amazing how expensive life is. Mm-hmm. And as a photographer, you kind of add up all of those expenses and say, okay, well, how much do I have to make in a month in order to live off of my work? And, if I were to list my revenue streams, it's education, it's licensing, it's selling prints, it's copyright infringements, of course. It's graphic design and product design. I've got a number of coins out from the Royal Canadian Mint that feature my artwork. And there are just so many diverse ways that it comes through. But I want to go down one specific rabbit hole here, where I started with the snowflakes. We talked about that earlier. And it's a good niche to talk about because I had done it for 2 or 3 years. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I had a bank of hundreds of images where I was posting a snowflake a day, every day for 100 days. This is before I had my daughter. I've since narrowed that down a little bit. But from December 1st until mid-March. And I built an audience around that. And then I said, okay, well, let's write a book. Let's crowdfund a book. Mm-hmm. On this topic. And I did successfully. Yeah. Sky Crystals, and you can get that at skycrystals.ca if you're curious. But
I own it, by the way.
The book is, and thank you for crowdfunding and supporting me on that project too, Frederick. You were a huge help there.
You're welcome.
But that book came out, and I'll save the whole issues with production and everything else aside. It was a huge nightmare there, as most crowdfunding projects might have. But I saw an order for the book after I had shipped out all of the initial pre-orders. And it was from somebody that was at CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And just on a lark, I sent the guy an email saying, hey, I see you're at CBC. Curious what you're working on, what the book is for. And he was working on an episode of The Nature of Things, which is a documentary series produced here in Canada. And the working title for that documentary was called Chasing Snowflakes. So you can imagine where I might fit in to such a documentary. And they featured me prominently as the first and last on-screen interview for that episode. So I bookended that quite nicely. That was seen by somebody at BBC. And BBC brought me in to do snowflake videography for a series called Forces of Nature. And I ended up getting the title card sequence from that. That was some freezing soap bubble footage. That one of the producers on that show or on that series ended up being the producer of something from Discovery Channel, a documentary called Mosquito.
This is awesome.
And they brought me into this to do extreme macro close-up of mosquitoes. They wanted me to focus stack a mosquito to get it perfectly sharp from front to back and then rotate it like 1 degree and do it again and again so that I could get a mosquito perfectly in focus spinning on a pin. I didn't know how to do that, but I said, sure, there's got to be a way to do it. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I had also been experimenting with ultraviolet fluorescence photography at the time. And I found a dead mosquito in my sunroom. And I shot that mosquito when I sent it to Discovery Channel. And I said, by the way, I can do what you want me to do. And we've got that whole thing buttoned down at Brock University here in Ontario. And that's all set. But how cool would it be if I shoot ultraviolet fluorescence of these mosquitoes? It's something that's never been done before. And they said, absolutely. We need to have half of your time just on this new thing that we didn't even know we wanted until you showed it to us. And so then I produced a lot of footage for them. It ended up as the title card for that documentary as well. The producer, the director from that particular documentary is now working on other projects for Discovery. We're just wrapping them up right now. They brought me into 2 of them, one for snowflakes and freezing soap bubbles, where I am on-screen talent for a small web series for that. And another one on ultraviolet fluorescence, where I am also, they're filming me shooting these things and the results from that. Yeah. And that we're just wrapping up the editing on right now. That is a rabbit hole. So I mean, you don't know where this is going to lead you.
That's a lesson in serendipity, right? And being open, because if you hadn't, that was a chain reaction, right? If you hadn't tried the first thing in that chain, who knows how many missed opportunities you would have missed, right? And they were all, I mean, keeping in the topic, right? They were all kind of in the same niche, because one person saw that you could do this and another person saw you could do it, and then on and on down the line. So
this brings up a good point. If you get really good at one thing, you can rise above to the point where you're the go-to guy or go-to girl for that, and it can translate into other things. Look at, for instance, a fellow Boisean here, Levi Sim. He does a lot of stuff, but he's known for those, the Steve Jobs portrait project photos, right? If you see that thing and it's well, shot well, chances are it's Levi Sim. That elevated him. You have to do something different to get noticed these days, if that's your goal. Some people just want to put their head down and just make a good living and just pay the bills that way. And if you want to get known at something, you have to be really, really good at it. And that's what Don's done.
All right, so I'm gonna throw a wrench in the skunk works here. And by the way, thanks to the chat room is having their own conversations in there. We're gonna pull some questions from there. Christopher Berry is the TWiP community manager. He's holding it down in the chat room and collating the questions so I can read them without going crazy. Thanks, Chris, for doing that. But let me throw a wrench in the skunk works here. So we've been talking about niching down and getting good at one thing, or getting really good at one thing or another. How do you avoid being pigeonholed? And what's the difference between being pigeonholed or typecast and niching down? Or is it just different flavors of the same coin? Don, what do you think?
I'm riding a fine line with those snowflakes, as you mentioned, because I've often been called the snowflake guy.
Right, and you don't want to be the snowflake guy. You're a photographer that happens to know how to take photos of snowflakes.
Exactly, but that niche does, as I just described, pay a lot of bills. And so building that audience, and I've been on national television a number of times talking about my work with snowflakes, and I don't mind that at all. I love it. I revel in that. But you have to make sure that whatever niches you are in are somewhat diversified. And I can quote Rick Salmon here. He's famously said, "My specialty is not specializing." Mm-hmm. But that's not true, because his specialty is specializing in a lot of different verticals. He's done 3D books for children, and then he's done like in-depth studies of butterflies emerging from pupae, and completely utterly unrelated things, but he's published books on those particular topics. So I think that the diversification that we have to have is to say, okay, we are going to get good as photographers, as artists, as multimediagraphers, as you say, Frederick, in as many of these verticals as we can possibly get without spreading ourselves too thin. And so that's where I come in, and I'll say, okay, well, Sharky, I've actually been contemplating when I should write an article on macro 3D photography for Petapixel. And I think I'm at about that point, and I'm going to write that article, and that will be seen by a good number of people. And so long as Michael decides to actually publish it, which he's never said no to me before, so cross my fingers. But the idea with that is that will put my name in front of a new niche, in front of a bigger audience. Mm-hmm. And when you see articles on Petapixel or any other large, like F-Stoppers or DP Review, you name them, you will see people, it's not an article saying, oh, take a look at this great landscape photographer. No, it's take a look at this guy that attached flashlights to drones and did light painting of mountains from a drone as a landscape photographer.
Sure.
That's a niche, and that gets attention on a global stage. So long as you've got that niche, you have to flaunt it. You have to put that in front of the biggest audience that you can. And everybody that is curious about the next great thing is curious about niches, and you can find a market for it for sure.
Yeah.
Here's the way I look at it. There are so many photographers out there who would kill to be known for one thing and one thing only, because right now they're not known for anything. And it just might mean that, you know, there's a lot of, like you said, landscape photographers. I wouldn't even try to compete in that because A, it's hard to, and B, there's millions of them out there, it seems, right?
Yeah.
So you have to do something different. Like I said, it's just what it comes down to. You have to do something different to be known for that, if that is the goal. And like I said, a lot of people would just love to be known as the snowflake guy and to make money that way. So it's like, you really can't, it's not like with TV or movies where you're Potsy on Happy Days, talk about old school, right? And no one will ever hire you again, Anson Williams, because you're Potsy or you're Ralph Mouth, right?
Yeah. Your age is showing. You need to tuck that back in, man.
Seriously.
You gotta bring on some Laverne and Shirley references. Don's over there, Potsy. Who is he talking about? All right, here's a word association game, guy. Before we get to the picks of the week, I'm gonna name a famous photographer, and you guys tell me what niche or brand of photography this person is known for. You ready? You guys can shout it out. There are no prizes for this either, by the way. Annie Leibovitz.
Portraits.
Don?
Well, yes, portraits, of course, but she's got her own specific style of portraits. If you see an Annie Leibovitz, you'll know it's hers.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the genre. You see her images and that style echoes back to her. And that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah. And that's another topic, right? I mean, once you are in a niche, how do you even fine tune that niche down so that, yeah, my niche is portraiture, but you can tell my portraiture within the niche. So a sub niche within the niche. All right, here's another one. Cartier-Bresson.
Henri Cartier-Bresson, photojournalism, but also just general street photography. And he's been known for the decisive moment, I guess, is the quote phrase from him.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you got it. All right, and the last one. This is easy. This one's for you, Sharky, since you love this genre. Ansel Adams.
Landscapes, of course.
Black and white landscapes with large format cameras, tripods made of wood mounted to the top of old cars. Right?
From a long time ago.
From Yosemite, right? So not only is it location locked, but also type of gear and type of processing. Yeah, so that's interesting. Well, that's good, guys. Thank you for your insights on ways to own your niche. I think it was very, very helpful. Let's dive into the picks of the week, and then we'll get into our live chat from the folks that are hanging out in the TWiP chat room over on YouTube. Don, you want to go first? What's your pick of the week?
All right. Well, this is something of a PSA to the people that made these lenses that I have that are no longer making them, and they're almost impossible to find on the used market. So I mentioned earlier that I've been a fan of 3D photography for a little while. It's literally adding an extra dimension to the work that I'm doing, and not everybody can see it properly without glasses or devices or what have you. But there's a number of lenses that I have that are really cool devices. So this is a lens that actually has two lenses in the same barrel. And on the back side of it, it splits the image into two. So half of the sensor gets the left eye, half of the sensor gets the right eye. Very simple. And I've got a number of them at different magnifications. So I've got 3 of them, I think, in total. They've made them in Canon and Nikon mounts. This is a natively Nikon one that I adapted to Canon. Notice the gaffer's tape around the barrel. Gaffer's tape is my friend. But these lenses allow me to do something really magical with my work and make it feel like I am in a world that is much smaller than me, an Alice in Wonderland field for sure. They stopped making these lenses a number of years ago. The last production model I think that they produced was in 2007. And TWiP is the name of the company. I'm probably butchering the Netherlands name of the company, but TWiP makes 3D viewers, and they've been making them for many, many years. And I have been bugging the owner of the company to bring back these lenses in a crowdfunding campaign. So I'm putting this out to the TWiP audience, the army, the people that are listening to this. Go to the show notes on thisweekinphoto.com, find the link to DeWidgeous 3D, or just type that into Google, and email the owner of this company, Jeroen. He's got to bring this stuff back, because I want more people to have these lenses in their hands to make some magical 3D imagery with their just plain old digital SLR. Maybe they'll make one for a mirrorless camera. I don't know, but they need to come back. And so that is my my word for the day. These lenses are fantastic, by the way. They're well built, hard to use, as most macro lenses are.
Yeah.
And there's a specific processing workflow you need to go through. It's not just dive in with a wide angle lens and get great results. You have to understand what 3D is all about. But it is a journey that is absolutely worth partaking on. But there's just not the hardware out there right now for most people to do it. The lenses aren't that expensive. They're a couple of $100. So if they were to remake these, I know a lot of people would buy them. So voice your opinion. Tell this guy to make more of them, and I hope he will.
All right, cool. All right, we'll definitely link to that wherever we can, and that's a perfect pick of the week. Thank you for doing that. All right, Sharky James, the camera is on you, man. What's your pick of the week?
It's hard to top Don because he's such a geek, you know. I feel like, as the kids say, I feel so basic compared to him with his nerdy posts. But mine, okay, so it's here in the Northern Hemisphere. We just danced our way into spring. Things are blooming, but it's also raining. There's a lot of storms that are happening throughout the country, right? So if you're out shooting little Johnny's baseball game or soccer game or whatever, you know, okay, your gear says it's weatherproofed or weather resistant. I don't trust resistant. I'm doing air quotes here. Just don't trust it. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So get yourself either a plastic bag that's almost free, or something like the LensCoat Raincoat Pro. It allows you to put your hands inside. It's like a rain jacket for your camera and lens, up to like a 300 2.8, and they have all different sizes. And also Think Tank Photo makes these as well. The Hydrophobia series, those are like hundreds of dollars, but this one's $100. The LensCoat Raincoat Pro. And it's just a way of keeping your gear from getting wet. Have it take the moisture and have it go away instead of it creeping its way into your lens or whatever. And a lot of people assume that, you know, because they spent $1,000 on a lens, that it's weather resistant or weatherproof or whatever. And maybe, or maybe it's not. I don't know which ones of mine are or not. So get something like this and be assured that you're not going to be getting your gear wet. In a downpour, you can still shoot if you have one of these.
Right.
And Sharky, I want to jump in and say something, because I had a participant on a workshop that I was doing through my local college. And he had I think it was a 5D series body and a weather sealed lens. I mean, it was a weather sealed set of camera and body. And so we were shooting waterfalls on that particular day, and he's got the weather sealed gear, so he's not bothering to cover it. Well, halfway through the day, his camera stops working. It starts giving him random errors, and it doesn't start back up again. Because you have to understand that the gasket that connects the lens to the camera body, if that's not properly cleaned from dust and debris, then water is still going to get into that. You've got to be very careful that weather sealing is maintained, and it's not just a given thing. And so if you're not caring for those types of minutia, you know, putting a filter on the front of the lens, which is often required for weather sealing purposes as well, your camera is not weather sealed. And so adding this one extra piece of gear to that equation helps with that guarantee. Now, there's really no guarantees in photography, but I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah, and there's no guarantees in the weather either. Yeah, I got trapped in a rainstorm once in Vietnam. Greatest experience ever, because it was like warm, like clean warm water falling from the sky. We're like riding bicycles through this rice paddy, and I had my camera. I think at the time it was a GH4, a Lumix GH4. And, you know, I was like, oh, this thing is supposed to be weather sealed, but I don't know, because it was coming down in sheets. I get to where I'm going, everything worked fine. But Sharky, I agree with you. Had I had what you're talking about, that would have been on my camera for sure. And now I do carry something in my bag, you know, even if it's just a plastic bag or something that you can throw over it, right?
At very least. So back in my photojournalism days, I had the Think Tank Photo modular belt system. There's a pro pick right there. with the different pouches. And I always had a weather pouch with me. Now, if the forecast said it was going to be sunny, then I didn't bring it, of course. But I had rubber bands in there. I had, plastic bags. You have to be prepared. You have, to the extent you can, mitigate.
That's right. Wrap it up. All right, cool. So I have a pick, guys. And I also have some news. So we relaunched, I/we/TWiP relaunched the All About the Gear podcast on the TWiP network today, actually. And new episodes will be going up about weekly, with the next one going out next Wednesday. So the posts will go live on YouTube and This Week in Photo and the feed every week on Wednesday. And the first review that I put out there to sort of relaunch that stream was a review of this guy. This is let me focus on this for the folks.
Oh, that's the G9 there, isn't it?
This is the Lumix G9 right there. Let me focus on it. You can see it right there.
I played with Levi Sims G9 and it's awesome.
Oh my God. And people think it's like I'm full of hyperbole when I say in the review, I said that camera, or this camera, is the best camera that I've owned. Now, the caveat is I haven't owned all brands of cameras, but of the cameras that I've owned so far, and I've owned several Nikons and several other brands, this camera fits me the best. It's like one of those cameras, you guys, like when you get a new piece of gear, or maybe I'm weird, but you get a new piece of gear and you just playing with all the little dials on it, and you put it, I put it on the nightstand next to me. It's on the nightstand. We don't touch at night, but it's on the nightstand. So I can think, you know what? I want to see what this little feature does. I can pop in there. So we're still in the honeymoon phase, but this thing is ridiculous. I love it. So if you want to learn more about the G9, it's go to thisweekinphoto.com. It's the first or the latest post up there right now. And you can also see the style of these new All About the Gear shows. I'm taking advice from the TWiP audience. They were saying they want things a little tighter. They want shorter shows. So the All About the Gear episodes, I'm going to strive to make them under 10 minutes. I think that one weighs in around 8 minutes and change, which is easier for me too. So
I mean, how much can you say about the mountain selection on the dial? Come on.
You can say a lot,
right?
You can say a lot.
Except for you put it on that, you're going to get some great photos.
Yeah. It's
not as good as P though. P's professional, as we all know.
Yeah. P is professional. Yeah, but it's interesting. So there's a lot of gear review shows out there, and I'm not positioning All About the Gear as kind of a gear review show. It's more of my opinion on different pieces of gear. Joseph Lanaschke, Photo Joseph, over on his channel, he does some amazing reviews of different things. Gordon Lang and Doug Kay, they were doing All About the Gear before I took it back over, before they left to go do their own thing. But their channel, the videos and the reviews that they do are comprehensive. They get down into the minutia of the millimeter thick paint on the camera and that kind of thing. I'm not doing that. I ain't got time for all that. So they'll do that, and I'll link to their things from what I do, but mine will have a slightly different kind of everyman's take on different pieces of gear.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Well, yeah. I want to say, just in a general sense, that Panasonic has been really hitting things out of the park lately. I've been testing the GX9, which is their much more compact version of that. And I'm not sponsored by them at all, but I asked them to get an early copy of it, and I've been testing it. In fact, I was shooting with it today, doing some of my limit pushing ultraviolet fluorescent stuff.
Nice.
And it is phenomenal what you can get out of these small micro four thirds sensors. And yes, the GX9 is no G9 in terms of buttons and dials and feature rich functionality. But if I were to be taking a camera with me that I can fit in the diaper bag these days, this is the camera, and I'm not going to be taking the 1DX Mark II with me with all my assortment of lenses when I'm out for a stroll. Right. These smaller cameras really pack a huge punch, and that didn't exist 5 years ago the way that it does today. It really opens us up.
Yeah,
and I know you guys are going to agree with me with this. Sorry.
No.
I try to interrupt FVJ any chance I get. That's right. It's a takeover. Dude. It's a TWiP takeover.
I have the mute button. I could mute you anytime I want.
That's true. You've got all the power. I say this all the time on my show. People don't look at a photo. You can't look at a photo and tell you what sensor was used. And guess what? Most people don't care. It's either a good photo or it's not. You know, Scott Bourne's killing it with his photos of eagles and such with a tiny sensor. You know, he shoots Olympus, you shoot Panasonic. And it's just, you can't tell. So these small sensors these days are just amazing.
Yeah.
They've come so far, and they're doing a lot of cool things.
Have you seen the Shot on iPhone campaign? I mean, with the billboards all over the planet? That's a really small sensor there. So yeah, it's, you know, that's a whole different show and a whole different argument, different sensor sizes.
And I'm one that I have pre-ordered the red hydrogen smartphone, which is supposed to reinvent photography from a smartphone standpoint. So this is just ripe for reinvention and a paradigm shift on small sensor technology, no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, no, it's good times. And, you know, and like I said in the review, there's no one right camera. There's no perfect camera. There's a camera that hits close to home for your particular needs and your genre of photography and all that. But there's no one camera that like, if someone says, that's like picking, you know, a spouse. Like, my spouse is better than yours. You know, well, yeah, for you, right? So, you can't equate these things, or a car, or a, you know, whatever. You know, all these things are personal, that are designed, or that we choose because they fit us the best, not because they're the best for everybody on the planet. And I think if more people start understanding that, we'll have less arguments about micro four thirds sensors versus APS-C versus full frame, and this lens versus that lens, and use this, you know, Capture One versus Lightroom. It's all this versus stuff. You know, when, like, Sharky, you hit it right on the head. In the end, we're creating content, and the people that are viewing the content don't give a crap about how it was made. They care about the story that you're trying to tell and the quality of the image. They're not going to dissect it and say, oh, I don't like that shot because it was done with a Canon. You know, no one cares.
What it comes down to, I think it's an insecurity with a lot of photographers. And after a while, maybe it's just, you know, age or whatever, you just don't care about these things.
Right.
If you care
it's
what size your sensor is, because you're worried what someone's going to say when they see the photo, photography, not for you.
Yeah. Or you're in it for the wrong reasons, or you're in it. Well, maybe that's your thing. Maybe you are the person. I know people that just care about, you know, they would buy the latest camera because they just like the latest and greatest thing. That's their thing, which is fine. But keep it corralled, right? Don't tell me that I need to have what you got because yours is better than mine. I have a neighbor that's like that. You know? So
I just don't care anymore. I'm doing my thing, you know?
As you get older, you know, and my sisters would tell you this, as you get older, you start caring less about what people think, and, you know, which I enjoy, because and we're off the rails a little bit now, but, you know, as you grow up, as you get older, I remember in high school, I was the nervous, shy kid, wouldn't make eye contact with anybody. I was like, oh, is my shirt on? Do I have the right shirt? You know, and all this stuff. And what about my shoes? Are they going to laugh at my shoe? You know, this level of nervousness that was completely unwarranted. And as you get older and you start seeing that everyone is the same, then those layers start shedding themselves and you become more confident, which I think, again, comes with age. So, you know, who knows? All right, guys, let's jump into the live chat here. Lots of stuff going on in the chat. Chris Berry is giving me, he's in TWiP Pro, posting the questions for us to answer. So if you guys want to pop into TWiP Pro, you'll see them, but I'm going to read them for you. The first question is from Mark Harris. So Mark Harris says, once you find a niche, how do you get the world to find out you exist? So you find a niche. Yeah, that's a good question. If a tree falls in the forest and doesn't make a sound, did it really fall? Don,
you go to the niche. Like if I want to be promoting my work to other 3D photographers, there's a community or multiple of them on Facebook. You know, there are forums that are dedicated to macro photography. There is an audience that has already established themselves. These people have coalesced into a group. No matter how small that niche is, unless you are defining it from the ground floor, in which case, well, you might be on your own. And then you might pitch that idea to a general audience, like Board Panda or other websites like that just aggregate some viral content, and maybe you can get an audience generated from it. But as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the niche stuff I've posted on PetPixel. and other photographic blogs like that. And I have built up an audience from that. It's a splash in the pan, but the more of those you get, the better it builds up. And then your audience, you have to try and contain. You've got to not just get people commenting on it, but you've got to capture their email address or get them to follow you on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you are the most active, and build that audience organically over time. It's taken me years, and most people will, unless you get some sort of viral success. You've got to start somewhere. So look online for the people that are interested in your work and gravitate towards them and find them, seek them out, even if it's on a one-on-one basis. There is value in approaching them at that level, because now that becomes a much more engaged audience as a result.
Perfect.
I can add to that. Go on Instagram and find out who the other photographers are that are in your niche and follow their followers. It's like a tap on the shoulder. You know, it's like, hey, I exist. So if somebody is really into portraiture or whatever, you do portraiture, you want to be known for that, go to the portrait photographers on Instagram, follow their followers. Those people get the notification. If they like your work, it's very democratic. They'll follow you back. If they don't, they won't, and just build it that way over time. It's you know, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah.
You have
Amen,
to have
brother.
patience to do this. If you're wanting instant success, you're probably a millennial.
Mhm.
No, sorry, millennials. No,
I'm a millennial.
I was going to
there
say
you go.
that.
you have to be patient. Anything that's worth having is worth working for, and that's what I did. You know, before I made money with the podcast, I had to really work at it for a long time. You just have to work it. It's just good old fashioned, just elbow grease, just getting it done.
Yeah. No, good answers. Good answers. All right. The next question is from WorkPix. What's up, WorkPix? WorkPix says, at which point does videography make you not a photographer? All right. I want to start with this one, so you guys can answer. So I would argue that photography itself, although an art form, a great art form, the main reason, maybe not the only reason, but the main reason why we have still photographs was because it was the only way that we had to get the ideas in the artists' heads across. So we had paintbrushes. That was the only way to get the ideas across. Now we have all these other ways, and more revealing themselves all the time, like VR and augmented VR and all these different ways to tell stories. So I would look at videography and video as just another way to tell a story. You don't necessarily, this is an and again, not an or. You don't necessarily have to shoot everything in stills. If the video or audio or written word or whatever is the better way to get your point across for a particular story, you are a content creator. Maybe stop thinking about ourselves as just photographers. Don, like you said, I used to say multimediographer a lot, right? But we are content creators, right? We tell stories by any means necessary, right? Whether it be a camera, a video, a animation, a cinematograph, whatever works for that story, we tell the stories. You guys have anything to add to that, or am I full of it?
I've got the definitive answer here. The moment you're a videographer and not a photographer is when you press that little red button on your camera and you're shooting video. Done.
You're still a content creator.
No, I mean, but hey, I've done a lot of time-lapse video. In fact, some of the footage that I've been shooting recently has required me to take stills and rotate or pan through things in stills that then get composed into video afterwards. So that blurs the lines. But I guess the true answer is when you've stopped taking pictures for the sake of taking pictures and you're only shooting video.
Yeah.
If you never take another picture again, which I don't think anybody will do, then you're no longer a photographer. I think everybody will always be a photographer at this point.
Yeah.
You know what cracks me up is when the 5D Mark II came out and everyone, you know, so the old school photographers and just people that are more of a curmudgeon than me were like, oh, video and a camera. I don't want that. My little point and shoot has that, just like the flippy screen. You don't have to use it. And what's funny is a lot of these guys, and it's usually guys, women are smarter than us. They're now shooting video, not just because they need to, they have to or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And they're good at it. It's just storytelling. Use whatever is available to you. I've got a great device. It's the Insta360 that captures, it's like the Theta and such.
Yeah.
And it's just use whatever's available to you to tell the story. If a photo tells the story better, take a photo. If video will tell it better, take some video. There you go.
And don't pigeonhole yourself into I'm a photographer, because when I was in the military, it was the you know, our audio. I was in the 1369th Audio Visual Squadron. My first base was in Japan. I was at Yokota Air Base, Japan, and we had still shooters. We had a still shooter group, and we had the video group, and we used to make fun of each other. It was always that rivalry thing, like, oh, no one, video's not an art form. Still, you can't hang a video in a frame and put it on the wall. That's not art, you're right. So we used to have those conversations all the time. And now you fast forward to today, and everything's converged, right? Everything is converged, and we have social media now. So arguably, there are more ways to show your work. Right. So we don't have to limit ourselves to 2 dimensions anymore. We have multiple dimensions that, like you say, Sharky, we can tell the story in.
And you can do that all on the same device. Before, you had to have the separate ginormous, you know, almost TV camera, shoulder mount TV cameras, right? Going to a recorder. And so those 2 crews had to be different. Now you've got it all together.
Yep, that's right.
I was almost in a narrative today where I would have wanted video over photography, because I was driving northbound on one of the main highways that connects through my city down through Toronto. But there was a 50-car pileup in the opposing traffic lanes. And I was almost in that because I chose a different route to go and check on my mom's cat while she's on vacation. So I just, you know, flip a coin. I could have been in the thick of that. And if that was the case, and there were all minor injuries, nobody was airlifted to the hospital. But if I got out of my car, damaged or not, I would have started recording things. I would have walked amongst the carnage and just videoed what this was all about. That would have made the news.
Yeah. Now, here's the question.
More than it still would.
Would you have done that if you had a DSLR or some kind of, you know, a camera with you? Would you have shot video with that, or would you have taken out your smartphone and done it with the smartphone?
If I had the DSLR with me, absolutely. Nobody's going to stop me. They might try, and that would create some sort of weird interaction where they legally can't. And then maybe that would, you know, bend in my favor from a branding standpoint. But I'm just trying to tell the story of what this chaos was. And so I could do that easily with a smartphone. I don't need to have the ability to control my aperture and choosing my focal length of my lens. The story is right in front of me, and I would be in it. And how can you best tell that story? Yep. Photo or video, it doesn't matter. Whatever the best means are.
I love it. All right, guys. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit here. We've got a lot of questions in here, but I got to end the podcast. So I'm gonna continue the stream. So folks in the chat room, sit tight. You can see me end the show, but we'll continue chatting after I roll the ending credits and all that, and we'll come back on screen and just kind of have a casual conversation and answer these questions. If you both still have time to do this, right?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to end the show now. Thanks, folks, for tuning into the podcast. If you want to tune in and see the questions that we answer, they will be on YouTube. But for the podcast listeners, this is the end of the show. Thank you guys for tuning in and downloading the podcast. And always remember to take that lens cap off. This is TWiP. All right, that's it. We ended the show. So now we can have a leisurely conversation and continue answering these questions.
Now the shirts come off.
Yeah, we can start swearing and stuff.
Where's my beer? You're right. All right. So Joel Figueroa says, how much is too long before admitting that the niche you're pursuing is, well, a dead end?
When you stop caring about it.
Yeah, when the thrill is gone.
Yeah, because it's an episode right there. Seriously, that's a big topic.
You have to keep doing it while you still care about it. And if the audience hasn't come to you yet, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But if the audience doesn't come and you're still happy about it, then you're still happy about it, right? So the life only dies when you stop feeding it.
I'd say don't do it if it's going to be to your detriment. And okay, going back to my podcast, when I first did the Lens Shark Photography podcast, I wasn't as disciplined as I am now. I'm doing 2 shows a week, 2 episodes a week. That doesn't include No Name Photo Show with Brian. And there were times where I went maybe 3 to 5 weeks between episodes because I was just like, well, you know, it's not a lot of people are listening. They're not going to care. I'll go work on the blog and such. So you have to be disciplined and you have to enjoy it. And if it's causing you trouble, cut it loose. But if you stick with it and you believe in yourself, I mean, I'm an example of that. We're all examples of that. You can't give up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and if you hit it right on the head. If you Don, like if the thrill is gone and you're not having fun anymore doing it, which is kind of why I took the hiatus with TWiP, right? If you're not having fun anymore and you're starting to dread doing a thing, you're not getting excited, and it's not consuming your thoughts during the day of the different things that you could do to make it better and all that, and it's more of a drudgery, then dude, it's time to do something else. Much like a relationship, right?
Well, yeah. I want to say on my own devil's advocate here. When I do my Snowflake series, it takes everything I have as a human being to complete it. And so when I ended the 70th image this year, I had over 200 unanswered emails. Some social media stuff, some business opportunities, some just general questions from fans, and some, heck, even family. I could not get to everything in every day. And now I've gotten it down to about 80 or so, a couple of weeks into my catch up. But it took everything I had, and it is a success. So I keep giving it that everything.
Yeah.
But if you do it right, it will own you.
Yeah.
I will never be inbox zero. That's not happening. Right?
I've
right,
tried.
Frederick?
I try every day, man. I try every
It's
day.
impossible.
And so, yeah, I've wanted to declare email bankruptcy several times and just select all, delete.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, email bankruptcy.
I think that's what Leo Laporte did, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm declaring email bankruptcy. I'm starting fresh.
Yeah, and if they're important enough, they'll email you back, right? But you may miss some
Leo,
opportunities.
You introduced Leo and I. Leo never emailed me back, so there you go.
Well, there you go. Well, that's Leo. Leo's a busy guy. He's a busy guy sitting on the top of the mountain like he does.
He really does.
Okay, so Craig Stamfley, TWiP Pro member, has a question. He says, what genre have you not tried yet, and why?
Dude-war and obvious reasons.
See, that's why you need to be on the show more, Sharky, right there.
I tell you, go ahead and book me as frequently as you want. I would have taken over TWiP that year you were gone if you wanted to. I would have just happily done it for free.
Oh, man. Well, next time I get fed up, I'll hand you the keys and moonwalk out the door, man. All right. Don, what about you, man? What genre have you not tried and why?
I can echo Sharky's statement exactly, and I can add, boudoir or portraiture, or I've second shot a couple of weddings here and there, but I did not ever want to first shoot a wedding. That was never my goal. Yeah. I dipped my toe in that water, and it did not work for me. So I thought to myself, why does that not work? Because that's the important question that you always have to ask. When you try something and it doesn't work, you can't just move on. Mm-hmm. You have to say, well, why is that not for me?
Yeah.
And because I did not enjoy capturing other people's memories as they saw them, or as they wanted them to be. Mm-hmm. And I mean, from my perspective, I can capture my family, my friends, and that's my perspective. That's my enjoyment of that. But to capture somebody else's memories exactly as they want them to be, that requires a certain psychologist attitude to really get inside somebody's head and understand them so deeply to make a successful image that I don't think I'm capable of, because it's just not where my interests lie.
That's why photojournalists make
a lot of respect for the wedding shooters out there, because multiple weddings on a weekend, every single weekend during wedding season, and it is arguably one of the most stressful times in someone's life that you are entrusted with capturing. So that stress is on you. So that's a lot every week to know that you got to be on your game. And there's no, like in photojournalism, sorry, there's no redos, right? Well, maybe a redo or two in some marriages, but
that's a lot of stress. I mean, you have to prepare for that. I probably would have been a good wedding shooter because I'm a storyteller, but if your heart's not into it, then you're just gonna wash out. You just can't do it. Like I said this on my show, I was great at shooting sports. I did a lot of it, pat myself on the back. You do it enough times, you're gonna get good at it, hopefully. I am so tired of shooting sports, so I'm gonna shoot some here and there, but I'm doing a lot of portraiture now because we've had a lot of things happen with our family recently, with our kids and such, and they're getting older, and I've only been a dad for almost 5 years now, and they're 14 on up to 25. And I want to capture not people's moments. I want to capture who people are. So that's important to me. Like portraiture really speaks to me these days. And I'm going to try some different things. I'm going to try some long exposure photography. You have to experiment. You don't know if you're going to be good at it or not, or like it until you actually try it.
And that's the cool thing about photography, because this one little thing can do all that stuff, right? I mean, we can play around.
Well, what lens do you have on that camera, by the way, Frederick?
Oh, it's funny you may ask me that. So that is let me bring that up here. So this is the Lumix 42.5 Nocticron f1.2.
So that's an 85.
It is, yeah, roughly an 85.
35 millimeter turns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
F1.2, a beauty.
Yeah, it is. It is. Speaking of portrait lens, it is like the quintessential portrait lens for Micro Four Thirds. Panasonic and Lumix.
Plenty of bokeh. Plenty. Even with the small sensor. Plenty of bokeh.
Yeah.
Plenty.
You know, I would go with the what's it, 15 millimeter f1.7, because that wider focal length for a running 2-year-old ends up being quite favorable.
Yeah. So many toys, so little time. All right, so the next question is from Trevor Pinocchi. Trevor says, friends and I used to have conversations about photography and video merging. We'd all have to learn motion at some point. We've seen cinemagraphs come to pass. Is the future stills or motion? There's that word again, that naughty word, or, right? Can it be
everything?
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It's everything.
Yeah, it depends on
like
the story.
I said, it's how what tells the story best. That's what you're going to use, and it might be 360.
Yeah,
you know. So here's the Insta 361. You're not going to use this for everything. You're not going to bust it out all the time. If you have nothing behind you that you want somebody to see, or if it doesn't make sense to explore around in 360, why are you shooting 360? You wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. You would shoot a photo, or maybe you'd shoot some video and point the camera in the direction of the important stuff, right?
Great. Yep.
Exactly. And as I mentioned, I've done a lot of 3D photography. And what if, and this is a big what if, but I think it's coming. What if ubiquitously every smartphone display had glassless 3D technology? You didn't have to wear any funky goggles or anything else. You just saw 3D because every phone had it.
Yeah.
If that happened, then every photographer would need to adapt to be shooting in 3D or in some sort of content that would give extra depth. Otherwise, they would be left behind and everything would seem flat and lifeless. So the technology and the society really defines what we are shooting. Stills are not going away by any means.
Yeah.
And video is in almost every way becoming more important. But that doesn't mean something else is also going to come in and be more important, as technology says, hey, by the way, we now have a way to view things differently. So we need to shoot and record things differently as well. That's always going to be on the horizon.
Yeah, it's the right tool. It's like we're Batman, right? And we have a utility belt with different tools that we can use depending on the villain we're fighting. And and that villain in the case of photography is storytelling, right? So like you said, Sharky, sometimes it calls for 360, sometimes it calls for stills, sometimes it calls for video, whatever. And it's your job now. Like if you rewind back, and things used to be simpler when we just had ISO 100, 200, 400, 1600, and some T-Max and whatever in the bag, and that was it. So we were limited in the stories that we could capture, or the kind of media we could capture. Those limitations have been blown away, and more layers get blown away every day. So now we can do more than we used to do. So now we're not limited to telling stories in 2 dimensions. We have multiple dimensions.
We're going to get to the point where ISO doesn't matter. And when you're shooting in a dark dungeon or cave, like, high school gym or something worse, like junior high gyms are like dark. It's a good place to knife somebody. No one will ever see it. It's so dark, right?
You heard it here first. If you're looking for a place to murder, Sharky James just told
If you're here for the after show, you're getting some good stuff. I saved all my good stuff for when we stopped recording.
I love it. We're still streaming.
No,
though.
it's going to get to the point where you can shoot 25,600 ISO and it'll look nice, and it doesn't matter. You won't have to have a 2.8 lens. And how great is that going to be for people capturing memories of their kids? Look at how many people, photograph their kids at home, and it's so dark, and they're just like, this is not for me. I'm doing a horrible job of this, and it's not going to be a problem in another 5-10 years.
Yeah,
and
less.
Canon just announced was it 100 frames per second, low light, black and white, albeit, but camera in the last couple of days, And the footage that they showed was not what I wanted to see, like a leopard jumping on or an owl swooping down and like in complete darkness, moonlit, grabbing a vole out of a field. But that technology, that is at our doorstep.
Yeah.
That is right in front of us. I mean, that's going to be a fairly niche product as the conversation has been about. But it won't be long before that ends up in our consumer cameras saying, you know what? We only have stars above us. Okay, let's make a landscape anyhow, because it's just as easy as it would be during the day.
Yeah.
Within the next decade,
too.
This is going to be here, right?
Yeah. All right. So Joel, this is a good segue. So Joel Figueroa says, "Will you or have you reviewed the Light 16 camera? You guys remember that?"
Oh, I want one. I don't want to own one. I just want to play with one.
I think I
Every
have that
review I've
condition
seen of
where
it says it's
the
horrible.
condition where things with holes kind of bug you. I forget what it's called. There's a condition where if you look at like a honeycomb or things that have a bunch of holes in it, it triggers a part of your brain that freaks you out. That camera freaks me out when I look at it. It looks like a bug. I don't know why. I don't know. You want it?
I want one of these because, well, of course, it's a bit of an anachronism in the industry right now. It does not have a place. It seems like it's trying to find an audience that doesn't exist. But at the same time, if it does a good job, and all the negative reviews that I heard said that it was based on the software interpolation of data that was the fault. And that can be fixed well afterwards. The hardware might not be the fault, but if they fail now, they don't get a revision 2. So I would love to play with it and point out the points of failure and why, and try to build them up, because this is a company that has done something really revolutionary in the industry. And I don't think that they are getting their due course here, because to their own discredit, they fumbled the software. And the hardware might be fantastic, and computational photography is growing hand over fist. It is just wonderful what's happening with computational photography. They haven't tapped into that, at least not for their own niche, as we're talking about. Yeah. So yes, I'd like to see it firsthand, because I want to evaluate whether or not that does have a future.
I wonder if they're going to get
Or is
Lytro.
it dumb like Lytro?
Yeah, thank you. I was saying, look at great minds. There'll be a cubicle
Lytro is not
Google.
done. They are going to be reborn to whatever Google can muster, and so it's just a transition for them, I think.
Google said they were more interested, I think, in the people than the technology. There was no plans. Who knows what they're actually doing?
Well, actually, the reversal of that was true initially. They bought all the patents, and the people were, quote unquote, going elsewhere from Lytro. That elsewhere was to Google, apparently, as we found out later on when people were independently questioned. So Google has, in some way, shape, or form, got the technology and got some of the talent that they wanted for that. So who knows what project Google is wrapping them into, but I want that too.
2 words: Google Reader.
The thing that's dead now, you mean?
Yeah, they just might Google Reader it or any other things.
You never know.
They tried to kill RSS. That's what the Google Reader thing was about, but it didn't.
Learn to focus your photo first, so you don't have to make people do it later.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's 20 seconds of fun and then it's done. That's why
the old man in you talking. It's technology, right?
No. What if you could do that
autofocus? We don't need
scale,
that.
Sharky?
In my day, we used to focus manually.
Sharky, what if I could do that on a macro scale with my water droplet refraction images, where I could shift the focus to be a flower in focus in the background, beautiful, crisp, sharp, and then shift the focus forward to have water droplets that are revealing that flower in focus in the water droplets with the background completely out of focus. Yes, that's a one-trick pony. I can't do that too many times before it wears out. But I think that if that were one case, I could come up with a dozen more if I had the gear in my hands and spent enough time tinkering with it. So there's always legs here, so long as you have the right ideas behind them.
Yeah,
I think another arrow in your quiver, right? It's another tool.
Yep. The light camera is fighting an uphill battle, I think, because the relentless release schedules for the iPhone and Android phones, and how those cameras get better and better and better with each edition. And then these cameras that we shoot with, DSLRs and mirrorless and whatever, they're getting better and better every 6 months, it feels like. To try to convince somebody to break away from all that and go try something completely different is, I don't know, it's going to be hard. It's kind of like you said, it's going to be a Lytro kind of deal. it's scary. All right, Alex.
And they're not cheap.
Alex Masella says, I photograph coins professionally. Don Komarechka, this is for you, I think. And also do video. How do I photograph a coin from different angles and convert that into a 3D object for rotation as a video?
Cognisys is the name of the company. They make the stack shot automated focusing rail, but they also have a rotational platform as well. So what you can do, and I've used both of these in synergy together, I guess would be the right word, because they really add more than the two pieces are together. I did this for the Discovery Channel mosquito shoot that I was talking about earlier, to focus stack a mosquito and then rotate it. And this is all automated once you get the right hardware from Cognisys. And if you want to just shoot video, you can get their rotational platform, and they've got a little remote, and you can shoot the video, you can light it, and then you can just rotate this coin around this thing at whatever speed you want, and you can shoot that as video. And it works wonderfully. I did this in the last year when I was doing a crowdfunding campaign for snowflake ornaments, where I 3D modeled a snowflake and then had it 3D printed. And then to show that off, I hung that model off of this hardware and then spun it around in 3D with the proper lighting on video. And it worked beautifully. So that's the hardware you need.
And I say don't do it because your head's going to explode.
Don Komarechka, one man should not hoard so much geek, man. I mean,
you have to be patient for that kind of work.
It's incredible. Don oozes geek. It's awesome. All right, here's the last question, guys. We'll look and see if there's any more in the chat room, but here's the last question Chris has funneled over. He's from Louis G. Gomez. Louis says, what about 500px? Is it a good place to develop your niche?
I have made some good contacts on 500px, and I have actually sold some prints from images that I've posted there. I've also done that through Flickr, and I've done that through Twitter and many other sources as well. So it is one avenue. I'm a little bit reluctant to recommend 500px now that they've been completely bought by a Chinese company, and they've had some bad press about how they license their own images. It has left me feeling a bit awkward about them. I don't know if you guys checked out the Chinese company that bought them and checked out their website, but it seems like a corporate placeholder website that has absolutely no content whatsoever. Even if you go to the English page, half of it is still in Chinese, and there is nothing of substance. And they now own 500px. So
VCG, right? Visual China Group.
Yeah. And they have a couple of Chinese blog posts on their website. But when you check with the services, as they're quoted in many articles saying that they are the Getty Images of China, it looks like somebody said, okay, well, we need a website up because we just bought the domain. Take 10 minutes and fill in some filler content. And that's what their website is. And that scares me. So 500px does not get my recommendation right now.
You hear that, Yevgeny Chabatarov?
I know. We got to get Yevgeny on.
Frederick's a friend of his, right? So, you know.
Oh, he's a friend of TWiP. So, yeah. So, we got to get him on and see if he can shed some light on that.
Clear the air when that happens. Please.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he lives like 40 minutes from me.
Why don't you go do a man on the street and get him and, pin him down and
I could do that.
Live.
Yeah, they're based in Toronto, and I'm just north of there.
All right, guys, here's another question. This is from Joel Figueroa. He says, sorry for backtracking, but what advice would you give for those in the process of figuring out their niche and furthermore, niching down? What was your process for getting your go-to niche? Sharky, you want to take that one?
What do you like to do? I mean, what's the goal? Is the goal to make money? I don't, who knows? Portraits, is that going to make you money? It's just, where's your clients at? What do you want to do? Yeah. What do you like to do? Do you like cars? Go shoot cars.
You got to do what you want.
You like women? Go shoot women. You like dudes? Go shoot dudes.
There you go. Yeah.
If you like cars, what do you like about cars? Do you like the aesthetics of the design? Then photograph the curves of those cars. If you like the way that they were engineered, then open the hood and photograph the details there. If you like the way they were perceived by the public and they have a cult status, then try to photograph that and envision that narrative. I mean, you can drill down into one topic into more and more niches, but the more specific you get, the more you will find your own style. And you don't get there without making mistakes, a ton of them. You have to do that. You've got to throw, at the dartboard and hit every single segment of it before you find the one that felt just right for you.
I'm just saying, though, there's probably not a market for photographs of the electrical systems of automobiles. That's probably too niche right there.
There might be a market for that. I'm going to say there probably is. And people that modify their vehicles, people that will go into retro vehicles and modify them to enhance them or change them, or you buy like the LE model and there's a hack to bring some features into the SE model, and you can photograph the PCBs and, you know, solder such and such. There is a narrow market for that.
Just blew my mind again.
The hacker market is there.
Don knows it all.
The short answer to Joel is in the immortal words of a group called Digital Underground, do what you like, right? So you got to do what you like. Google it if you guys don't know who Digital Underground is. You might be too young for those guys. All right. Trevor Panaki has the last question. He wants to know, did Frederick finally buy that Mavic Air, and have either of the guests started exploring drone photography? No, I have not bought the Mavic Air. I'm still loving my my regular Mavic Pro. I don't need the Air. I don't think I need the Air. I haven't crashed my Mavic Pro yet. So, no. And I still have, I don't know if you can see it back there, I still have the Phantom Pro, which is still in perfect working order. And I love that. So I have two drones. I can't justify a third. Are either of you guys diving or jumping into the world of aerial UAV photography?
The next time I go in the air with a camera, I'm going to be accompanying the camera. And I mean, I want this to be the next time. It might not be, but it's on my bucket list to be flying in the Avro Lancaster bomber, which you can book for private flights here out of Hamilton, Ontario. It's the only one in North America that is still airworthy. There's one in the UK as well. And I want that to be a personal experience of joy flying in a Lancaster. But I don't have any reason to own a drone. I mean, I just don't need to get that perspective higher up. I'm looking more down to earth in much of my work.
Yeah, you're the opposite of a drone person.
Nano drones.
Yeah.
Nano drones. Yeah, you're the opposite, Don. You need like, I could see you like, what's that photography where they photograph the inside of the human body? What is that?
I don't know, but that sounds like me.
That's the next niche down for Don, is endoscopy. Get in there and look around and, you know, fantastic voyage that sucker. All right, cool. All right, I think that's it, guys. You guys have any final thoughts you'd like to add before we end the stream?
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you first, Sharky.
I was gonna say, I just imagine that if Don was ever a doctor, he would have been like a proctologist or something. Like, you know, colonoscopy is like right up his alley.
Oh, literally.
Oh boy, no, I would have been a dentist because I would have been able to play with X-ray cameras.
Oh god, this is going downhill fast, man.
No. According to the state of the state of New York, you are the, well, I can't say it. Seinfeld reference. Remember the license plate?
Oh, do I ever? And by the way, I've been watching, if you guys haven't watched Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee on Netflix, it is wonderful and enjoyable. And I can watch that while I edit photographs in the background, and I don't want to stop. It's great. Jerry Seinfeld does a great job with that. But Frederick, what I wanted to say was thank you for TWiP and bringing this whole thing back, and bringing the old gang back together in many ways, but also reinventing it to a way that is very engaging. I love the audience engagement and this kind of after show environment where we can just keep talking. And I don't care if the audience drops off, because my opinion is still going to be heard by at least you two.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. It'll be in the replay too, because the cool thing about all this is, because we're streaming, we're still live streaming. As we're streaming, we still have a live audience, and it's still going to be on YouTube and archived. It's just at that break point, that's where we'll break it for the podcast listening audience, because they don't, necessarily want to download a terabyte of audio data to their phones. So
stay for the after show if you want the proctology humor.
Exactly. The after show is where the fun is.
This is the tail end for a reason.
That's right. Oh God, here we go. You see,
you
that's what you call
right?
niching down. So Sharky's niching down lower and lower. He's trying to find the bottom.
Oh, trying to find the bottom.
Boom, boom.
You're here all week.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Don, what's your URL where people should go to connect with you again?
Oh, you can find all of my work and my contact information at doncom.ca. That's donkom.ca. But as I mentioned earlier, closer to the top of the show, photogeekweekly.com is where I've got a fun little podcast. And you were on very recently, Frederick, and we had a great geeky chat.
Yeah.
We really dive into the weeds on that. There is no topic that is too geeky for us to cover. And I don't care if that alienates most of the audience, because there is a niche, there is a following that I can endeavor to culture there and to grow. And we're doing pretty good so far for the kind of niche that I'm trying to go for. We're at about 2,000 people per episode right now listening.
Very
so
cool.
I am
That's great.
thrilled that many people care about the obscurities we talk about. And I encourage more people to join in, and I thank those that listen.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on, man. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to have my mind blown by Don Komrechka, because
you make us feel stupid. Thanks.
Literally, I feel like I just jumped out of my time machine, and Don is the next evolution of man or something.
Oh no, don't go there.
Sharky James, man, tell us about where people should go to connect with you and listen to your awesome podcast and all that stuff.
Lens Shark, not Len Shark, Lens Shark, 2 S's in there, on all the social media channels. The Petapixel Photography Podcast, petapixel.com/podcast, and also No Name Photo Show with Brian Matiash, nonamephoto.show.com, or just type in No Name Photo Show in your favorite podcatcher and you will find us. Lucky you.
Awesome. You guys are great. Both of you guys are great. Thanks for coming on. Please come on again. I would love to this, like, having certain guests on the show. It's always a formula. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You guys know that, right? But when it works, you want to continue the show, and you don't even notice that you've been doing the show for an hour and 45 minutes, right?
We're gas bags, is what you're saying.
We are. We're full of something. We're full of something.
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys. So we're gonna end the show now. Thanks all the folks in the chat room for keeping it alive in there. Thanks Christopher Berry for holding down the community and making sure everything ran smoothly and giving us all of our awesome questions. It's been a great show. And you know what time it is? It is time to take that lens cap off. This is TWiP.